Hi, everyone. My name is Barbara Dillon. I am the editor-in-chief of Fanbase Press, and I'm honored to be here today with a wonderfully talented group of panelists to discuss the role that young reader graphic novels play in education and libraries. We're honored to have this discussion be part of Comic-Con at Home this year, and I'd love to go ahead and jump in to introduce our panelists. First, we have Harley Salbacka, who began her comic book industry career as the manager of Blast Off Comics, which was one of the most prestigious comic book retail stores in LA. After 4 years of retail leadership, Harley taught preschool and earned her degree in early childhood education. She now brings those combined credentials and experience to Humanoids as she helps the team to connect with retailers and develop its new line of books for young readers. Harley, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. We also were joined by Tina Loreno, who is a librarian for the city of LA and part of the library's digital content team, where she is responsible for web content and design with a focus on teen user needs and comics advisory. But before becoming a librarian, Tina worked in the world of TV animation, doing color design on such shows as Harold and the Purple Crayon, Jackie Chan Adventures, and The Boondocks. Tina is the past chair of the graphic novels the BiG NFT committee for YALSA, and she is currently an active board member of the Graphic Novel and Comic Roundtable for ALA. Thank you so much for joining us, Tina.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Excellent. We're also joined by Lauren Kratz, who has been a children's librarian for over 10 years now. She is currently the children's librarian 2 at the LA Public Library Studio City brand. Lauren first discovered her love for using graphic novels in library programming after attending a talk with Sean Tan about his best-selling graphic novel, The Arrival. Since then, Lauren has been passionate about sharing graphic novels with children, young adults, caregivers, and educators. Lauren, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Hello, everyone.
Absolutely. And last but certainly not least, we are joined by Paul Downs, who is a writer, animator, and educator with 19 years of experience spanning film, TV, video game, and graphic novel production. His animation credits include the Ice Age franchise, Dr. Seuss's Horton Hears a Who, Rio, Epic, Freebirds, the 2017 Oscar-nominated film Ferdinand, and most recently, Spies in Disguise. Paul has also written and developed projects for Cartoon Network, 20th Century Fox, Blue Sky Studios, and Smart Entertainment. In June of 2019, Humanoids released his graphic novel, Urban Legendz, a collaboration with fellow animation colleagues, Nick Bruno and Michael Yates. Thank you so much for joining us, Paul.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. As you can see, viewers, we have a very esteemed group of panelists today, so I'd love to jump right into the conversation. First, I want the audience to learn about each of you as individuals and how you came to work in your given field. So what inspired you to become librarians or comics professionals? Paul, why don't we start with you?
Perfect. My journey into comics was a little bit indirect. I knew from a very young age that I wanted to be an animator more than anything in my life. And my parents helped me, point me in the right direction for that. So I always tell my students, right now I teach animation. So I tell my students constantly, because they've all grown up with the internet. They've had it since the very beginning, since they were born. So I tell them that my dad was so supportive. He'd go to the library, he'd go through the card catalog, he'd find every book on colleges. He'd choose art colleges, he'd send letters to them to get them to send catalogs back, and we'd go through, and it was this entire process. But every step of the way, they were there to support me and to help me get through that process. I found a school in Sarasota, Florida called Ringling College of Art and Design, and that's where I spent 4 years. And then from there, I went on to work in video games and TV and film, and then probably about 4 or 5 years in, I decided I wanted to start writing. So I kind of partnered up with an animator colleague of mine, Nick Bruno, and we started writing projects and selling projects. And there's always this one project that we had that we wanted to keep it close to us and to see what we could do with it. So and that was Urban Legendz. So what we did was we partnered with a student of mine named Michael Yates, and he was a Pixar story artist at the time. And we basically came together and, wrote the book. And then through a query letter, they actually work. We contacted Humanoids, and the rest is history. And we started a great partnership at that point. And so it was a long journey,
but well worth it, I'm sure. Tina?
So I started off, I graduated my undergraduate with a degree in art. I thought I was going to stick in the art field forever. I was lucky enough to get into the world of animation, and I did color design for many, many years, as well as 2D to 3D conversion and all kinds of different world of animation projects. But it just was very difficult to be a single mom and keep up with that sort of freelance lifestyle. Not really able to do it at all anymore. So I went back to school and I thought, what can I do that still like hits all those little bells and whistles for me? And I had a friend who was a librarian, and I never thought that would be where I would end up, but it just made sense. And it's so great that there's so many diverse sort of career paths that you can take in the world of libraries, and that I'm still doing something I'm really passionate about. I'm still working with comic books, graphic novels, cartoons, and that's still a part of my my world. So, and I've always loved cartoons, comics, animation. As a kid, the only place you could go was really the liquor store, and I would ride my bike and look at that spinning rack and wonder, like, this is where you get comics. What are all these grown-ups doing in here? So that's my story.
That's awesome.
Wonderful. And Lauren, what about you?
Well, when I think about why I became a librarian, I automatically think of my dad, because when I was little, he would just have books. He still has books falling out of the closet, stacks of books all over the floor. He has one room just filled with books. There are just books. He would stuff books in my drawers in my room when he ran out of room. So I just think of my dad whenever I think of why I became a librarian. I got my first library card when I was 3 years old. I'm originally from New York City, so I was able to walk to my local library in 5 minutes. I worked at the library in high school, and in college I was going to become a teacher, but then just, sticking with working with the library world since I was in high school, I had a librarian encourage me to go to library school. So I went to library school, and I've been a librarian ever since.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Lauren.
Amazing.
And Harley, what about you?
Well, like you said already, I obviously ran a comic book shop for a long time, but I really found a love for books through my parents, who would take us to the library a lot because there was a lot of us in our family, and we were really low income. So there was not a lot of activities that were extremely stimulating that they could do with us for free. So we went to the library a lot, so much that my mom ended up working part-time at a library once we were a little older and like off at school. And so then after that, like all through high school, I would hang out at the library after school. There was no comic book shop in my area, actually, but I grew up watching like Batman, the animated series, and the animated Spider-Man. So I always loved those characters, and I'd find little bits of them literature-wise in places. But then my mom's library did a graphic novel section that she curated, because she was like, well, this is fun. I feel my kids are kind of into it. Like, let me make it so that I don't have to purchase books all the time for them, because they read so quickly, and I can have it for other kids to enjoy as well. So that really dove me into graphic novels when I was like 14, and comics and stuff like that. And I've always been a huge proponent of literature and of reading of any kind and bringing stories to people. So then I started working obviously at Blast Off at the shop, which is a work I really enjoyed, because again, I got to share stories with people all the time. I got to share my favorite stories, help them find stories they loved. And then of course, working in a comic book shop is not the most lucrative job in the world that you can do forever, especially in Los Angeles. So then I ended up at Humanoids. And then with them, I get to do a very similar thing that I was doing for years at the shop. I get to share wonderful stories that we curate ourselves, and I get to be part of the process early on, which is also amazing. And then I get to share them with my amazing friends who are also librarians, like Tina, who I met because I worked at the comic book shop.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Harley. Well, for all of us, we're going to be talking a great deal about young reader graphic novels today. So I feel like it's helpful for our audience that we define what that means. So how would you each define young reader graphic novels, and why does it help to determine the age appropriateness for a graphic novel or comic book series? Why don't we start with our librarians? Lauren, we'll start with you.
Well, every time I'm helping families find books and we end up in the graphic novel section, always, I don't think there's ever been not a time where a parent has told me, well, I don't want my child just reading graphic novels. That's not real reading. And I've gotten better at hiding my annoyance. And the line I always say when someone asks me, what is a graphic novel? I say it's a combining, synthesizing text and illustration for deeper learning and understanding. And when I say that line, something happens. There's a light bulb moment. I don't know if it's because I'm using the word synthesize or deeper learning, but something clicks and the parents kind of calm down and allow their children to check out those graphic novels. I think it helps them just relax and understand that it is learning.
Tina, what about you? What are your thoughts?
As librarians, we love to categorize and put things in boxes, and we sometimes use terms that the general population doesn't use. I say YA all the time, and I've had non-librarians say, what are you talking about? And I said, that means young adult literature. So I forget that not everybody knows what those terms are. Teens, tweens, middle grade, JFIC, juvenile fiction, are all terms we love to throw around. So it's hard to categorize where a young reader ends and a middle grade reader begins. I try to look at the age of the child, what they've read before, basically do that reader's advisory that we do with anybody else. What have you read before? Oh, you like this? Well, here's something that falls into that category. If you want to like give a strict definition, young adult can be anywhere from 12 to 18 is considered, can be considered a teen book. But obviously there's that 9 to 12, and then 12 to 14 is sort of that gray area. And that's really where you have to find out what books are the child already reading? What is their reading level? Are they a high-low reader? And I think graphic novels are, and I echo everything Lauren said, are a great way for a child to continue learning. Why they have to go from a picture book to a book with no pictures. Suddenly, here's, oh, it's great, you're reading picture books, but then you reach an age where, no, sorry, you don't get any pictures anymore. And maybe that's how that child learns. They're learning, they're a visual learner, and they really need those images to help them. So I think I just got into the weeds. But
No.
It's a hard definition, but I think you really have to look, you can go with either those ages, or you can kind of take each child individually.
Absolutely. Well said, Tina. Absolutely. And Harley, coming from the publisher's perspective, I would imagine especially that when you are gearing your content to your demographics, your readership, it's very helpful to define what that means. So what does that look like for you?
Yeah, so from the publishing side, and it's so interesting for me to see it from, I've seen now this same kind of thing from multiple angles at this point, because I was running a comic book shop that had a dedicated kids section and young readers all ages section. And then I went and taught preschool, which is a whole nother ballgame when it comes to books and literature, since they can't really read yet. And then onto the publishing side, where we're creating the content for this huge mass that keeps growing. It's such a large growing demographic. And for us, like when I first got to Humanoids is when they first were like, hey, we're going to be doing a new imprint called BiG. And I was like, what is it? And they're like, oh, it's our children's line. And I was like, oh, cool. A young reader's line. That's amazing. And then they were like, yeah, so we're learning about it. And so it was me having some knowledge in that already, because when I worked at the shop, I curated that whole section. I read all of the kids' books that went in there so that I knew exactly what was in them, because unfortunately, not everyone has caught on to putting the age ranges or the age level on the back of their books, which is astounding to me because it makes it so much easier for everybody. Librarians, it makes it easier for you. Parents, it makes it easier. Me selling stuff where I can't necessarily read everything made it easier for me. So that was a big thing we did with Humanoids, where every single one of our young readers titles has an age range on the back. But to even get there, it's a lot of work. I mean, we obviously are picking the best stories possible, like Paul's book, Urban Legendz, which is a wonderful, wonderful book. But we take a great story and we all go, okay, we all love this story. Yes, we're gonna do this book. And we don't think about, no one's thinking about age range yet, except for me. And then I go, okay. And they go, Harley, what age demographic? And I go, this age demographic. But then I have to solidify it because I want it to be there and have it be official and have it there for the librarians. So we actually get all of our young reader stuff leveled. And leveling a book is basically, there's a company who reads it along different guidelines to tell you what the age group officially is for that child. And that is what we put on the back of the book. That is the age range that goes on the back to make it easier for everybody. So it's a lot of extra work in the back side of it, because you don't do that with adult books. You just go, oh, this is a great book, we're just going to make it. With kids books, we definitely have a lot more thought. I am definitely the one going, okay, what is in right now? What is it that kids are being drawn to? What is it that they want to read? Since we do live in an extremely visual world where kids are on YouTube all the time, they're watching TV. So having them read a graphic novel is an amazing step to getting them addicted to reading, because they still have that visual aspect. So we have all this other work that we do on the backside, where I'm immediately, as soon as we have a new book where they're like, okay, we think we're going to do this book, I'm like, okay. And I start going through all my checklist and making sure it feels not just like a great story that we want to share, but something that kids are really going to gravitate towards and love. And that hopefully parents will love too, because Laura and I have had I had the same conversation at the shop all the time where they called them not real books. And I was like, so personally offended.
And Paul, we'd love your thoughts, especially coming from the creator's perspective. And you've not only worked in the sequential art medium, but obviously a number of different entertainment mediums. So is there something for you that you gravitate towards in working with material for younger audiences? Does it provide a different tool set for you?
It's my absolute dream to work with, the child audience. And what's interesting about Urban Legendz is when we first approached Humanoids with the pitch, it was much more adult. It was actually a lot older skewing. And we had several conversations with Alex Donahue, just kind of how to pare it down and make it more accessible to a wider audience, because we were very niche. It was even more adult than A Stranger Things. It was kind of like we were in Stephen King's It world. Like that's kind of the realm that we were in. So we had a ton of conversations about it. And what ended up happening was it was all for the best, because nothing that was in there that was making it non-accessible to a younger audience was helping the story. It wasn't making it any better. It was all just kind of gratuitous. So it was a great learning experience. And every single one of those meetings that we had and all of those note sessions helped it get better along the way every single time. So it was, we looked at it like it was our responsibility to tell a story and have something to say with it, but also make it accessible to, the audience that we're going for. And so my kids can read it and things like that. So they helped a lot.
Excellent. And going back to our librarian panelists, Tina and Lauren, do you feel, and I know Lauren, you've touched on this a little bit, do you feel that there are large demographics, either of a specific age group, parents or kids, or somewhere in between, that are really seeking out comics and graphic novels right now? And because of that, why do you feel it's important to bridge that gap and have more comics in your libraries? Tina, why don't we start with you?
Well, the kids are clamoring for it. So the kids are asking their parents, this is what I want to read. I read this and now I want to read more. I read drama, I read Smile, now what else is out there? And the parents are finally, not all of them, but a lot of them are realizing, wow, this is a great way to keep my child reading. They started off reading, but they're not ready for chapter books, or they're not that interested, and that visual aspect is what really sells it. At least I know for the librarians, we feel like this is a great way to keep a child reading and engaged. And it's only in the last 5 years, when I was looking for this panel, like what titles would I suggest, and I realized just how many there are in the last 5 years. So 20 years ago, if there was a graphic novel to suggest, I don't even know what it would be. There would be one or two, and now there's just, you've got, a year's worth to keep a kid engaged, and that's very exciting.
Lauren, what about you?
There is not one child that I work with that does not like graphic novels. They may have a genre that they enjoy, maybe funny or historical fiction in graphic novels, but not one child I know doesn't like graphic novels. So it's very important that I keep purchasing graphic novels and supporting graphic novels and their authors, illustrators, creators. And I just had to do one more whole bookcase to hold all the graphic novels I've been ordering. And everyone is always in that section, from 6 years old all the way up to 12 years old. So there is an imprint called Toon Books, and I've made a whole shelf of them. So once the children are kind of trying to get away from picture books, a great bridge book, like Tina said, is graphic novels, and that imprint Toon Books is great for that 6-7 year olds that are getting out of picture books and entering graphic novels, and those have been a really, really huge success.
And this is a question for everyone on the panel, and this is obviously an ever-present concern, both on the educational end as well as the creative end. But how would you each describe the state of inclusivity in the comic book medium, both in terms of the creators telling the stories as well as the stories and characters being told themselves? Do you see an impact when inclusivity is developed into your catalogs as well? Paul, why don't we start with you this time?
So for us, inclusivity and diversity was the number one thing that we were going for with this project. We didn't want it to pander or to, for token characters or cliches or anything like that. We wanted to be very truthful. So Nick, Michael, and I, where we grew up, we tried to reflect that. Our friends, we wanted it to feel like an Amblin type, Spielbergian universe, but our friend groups didn't always, look like that. So we wanted to try to set it in a different location, a more urban location where, growing up, I knew the homeless population, and I'd go into a store and I'd buy an extra teeny drink or an extra candy bar, and then I'd come out and I'd give it to them. And it was just this community of diversity and just culturally just always growing. So that was kind of what we set out to do with this. We wanted to have the fun monster angle, but then we also wanted to kind of dive into the reality and what monsters do kids actually experience, real life, not the literal of, like the monster bed bugs, but what is it like to deal with gentrification or relationships with the police or bullying or, things like that kids are experiencing day to day. So we wanted to make sure that it was socially conscious as well as a throwback to the fun adventure stories that we grew up with.
Absolutely. And Harley, what about you?
I've worked with kids, obviously, for a long time, not just teaching preschool, but in general. And my favorite parts of the shop were when the kids came in and came to the kids section to explore. And one thing that I've always noticed about children, and this is something that they psychologically just do, is when they're very young, they're drawn to characters that look like them or the people that they know. That is what they're drawn to. When you think about the comic book world, for a very long time, there were not a lot of characters that looked like everybody. It's been a great, amazing new thing that I think it's been such a beautiful thing to see that the comic book and graphic novel world is finally showing so much more diversity, so many more different characters. Even just little kids. I had a little boy who used to come to the shop a lot, sweetest thing, and he was 4 when he first started coming in, and he had just discovered that Miles Morales existed. And I remember his excitement because he loved Spider-Man, but this Spider-Man was him. It looked just like him to him. He's like, this is me. And he became so engrossed and so obsessed. And his mom was like, yeah, he had no interest in books until he saw Miles Morales on a cartoon in like one episode. And that's what drew him. And he found out there was books about it. So then she would buy him, well, she'd skip some of the parts in some of the books because it wasn't all age appropriate, but she would buy him that stuff so that he at least could be looking at the books. He could be seeing someone who looks like him, who has a story maybe like his there, because that's all we want as people. We like hearing and learning about other people's stories and also seeing stories like our own. So I think that it's definitely something that is extremely important and that I'm so glad the world is starting to do. And I'm so glad that we at Humanoids, have books like Urban Legendz that do that for children, because they deserve to see stories that are about the world that they live in, not the imaginary world from the 50s that no longer exists.
Lauren, what about you?
Well, the 2020 Newbery winners, New Kid by Jerry Craft. And that book has so much diversity. One, we had read it for book club and we had recently interviewed Jerry Craft for a podcast episode. And all the children kept telling me and kept telling Jerry, this is me. This is my experience. This is what I see and the other children that I interact with. And that just represents what children want and what they want to read about. They want to read about, like Harley said, children, other characters that look like them and have the same experiences that they do. And when they don't have that, they don't want to read it. They just don't. Jerry Craft had said something to me where he said, I wasn't a reader when I was a child because there were no characters that looked like me. There were no experiences that I could relate to. And if I had that, I would have been a reader earlier. And that really hit me because I've heard that from children today, that same line, if there's no characters that look like me, experiences that I can relate to, why do I want to read that? So I really think its diversity is very important, and especially in graphic novels, because graphic novels are so popular.
And Tina, what about you?
I could just say ditto. I would say the same thing. I think it's so important for kids to see themselves, and I do feel like that's happening. And it's not just the librarians, the parents can say it till they're blue in the face, but it's when the publishers and the creators and the content providers are realizing that, and that they're providing those experiences for kids. And then in return, their book sales are going up. It's a win-win for them as well. So they're seeing that it really is a need, and kids want to see themselves, and that's super important. So.
Yeah. Now, in light of the impact of COVID-19, as clearly we are impacted by it ourselves doing this virtually for Comic-Con this year, there is a need for more virtual opportunities. So what are some of the ways that you are each adapting your work and or outreach efforts to really accommodate that new path forward? Why don't we start with the librarian end? Tina, we'll start with you.
Well, it's been an interesting pivot to be doing this from my living room, but I think in some respects it widens the availability of what authors you can get. Before, well, we can't get that person because they live in New York. They can't come do this story time with us. But now we're seeing that it's kind of opened these extra opportunities. And I know Lauren's going to speak about that because we have a podcast at our library, and she's now able to get these authors that don't live in Los Angeles. And as part of our digital content team for Los Angeles library, we really had to, this is the only way we can reach people. So we beefed up our e-media collection. Hoopla has so many great graphic novel titles. Overdrive as well has graphic novels and manga. And we have seen the numbers just go through the roof. So we know that people are accessing those items, that they want them. And so we're just bringing it to them. So.
And Lauren, what about you?
Well, now because all our programming is virtual, I've been doing virtual programs via Instagram Live and Zoom links. And two of the ways that I've kept encouraging people to keep reading those graphic novels, keep using their library card from home via Hoopla Digital, where there's tons of wonderful graphic novels that you can read from home where you don't have a wait. You can just automatically just read it right away. One class I've been teaching is this writing workshop that I used to teach when we were in person. And their favorite thing to do is to write and illustrate their own graphic novels. So I send them as a PDF, different word boxes and different pow and boom, different things that they could use to create their own graphic novels. And then at the end, we do a share. They love that. They do that on their own, even without me now. And then another thing is, like Tina had mentioned, and I had mentioned before, our Children's Book Club podcast. We've actually been able to record more podcast episodes faster because everyone's at home. So we've been recording. We recently recorded with 2020 Newbery winner Jerry Craft of New Kid. We've actually done a wonderful podcast episode with Emma Steinkellner, the author of The OK Witch, which is another very diverse book. And the children get so excited. They're just so, not like they're not engaged with other types of books, but when they're interviewing someone that's written a graphic novel, they're like extra ready. They are excited. They're happy. They have more questions, I noticed, connecting the text and the illustrations together. They have a lot of questions about that. I noticed they're just more engaged when they're talking to someone that's written and illustrated a graphic novel. So those are some of the things that we do to stay connected with our patrons and continue to encourage graphic novels too in programming.
And Harley, what about you?
First off, I want to see all those graphic novels that the kids made, Lauren. So send that my way. That sounds amazing. Yeah, so with Humanoids, as soon as we got into quarantine and working from home, which is such a strange adjustment because we are just like you guys, like we're used to having, I mean, we're not a huge office, but we're used to having everybody there so that immediately we can go to somebody and like talk and chat about stuff. So for us, as soon as we went digital, I was like, went to quarantine. I was like, what are the librarians going to do? That's what I thought. I was like, and so I think I emailed Tina and I was like, okay, what else can we do? And we started having a conversation, but we noticed with Hoopla, because we can see all the stats on our side for us, like that the largest portion that was growing was all the young reader stuff. because parents can't take their kid to the library now. They can't get them new content, so they have to give it to them digitally, even if they weren't before. So Humanoids, I immediately curated a list of all of our young reader titles, all of the BiG imprint, and I was like, okay, here's a curated list. We have this for the kids. Let's get that on Hoopla. Let's promote that. So that was something that we really, really pushed right away. And we've really been trying to make sure that Hoopla has all of our content on there, so that it's easy for everyone to access for free, because we just want you to read great stories. We just want people to have access to reading great stories, especially kids, because reading is so important. So I think we always had a focus on digital, but we made a huge extra focus on Hoopla as soon as we were in quarantine. And that's the main thing we do. I mean, we go on our Instagram, we have ways for you to read books for free through our Instagram and stuff. So if you follow us on Instagram, you can get a lot of information that way. Also, people have just been emailing me and asking me if they have any questions, and I answer. But yeah, it's been a twist. It's been a turn from not being able to give any physical books to people.
Totally understandable. And Paul, what about you?
This experience has been very similar to the way it was working beforehand in some ways. A lot of the animation I do is done remotely, so a lot of Zoom calls, just typically. Same with collaborating. Nick is in New York and Michael is in California. So we're constantly having to communicate this way anyway, because we can't, for brainstorming and things like that. So it's very, very familiar. I think what it does is it opens up opportunity to, sit in on more, Q&As or presentations that people are given, or I teach animation and story at college, and it's a great opportunity to reach out to friends to come into the classroom and to, share their knowledge. It's just, everybody's accessible at this point because people have time and they have the ability to jump on. So it's been pretty amazing in that way for sure.
Well, we are sadly running short on time. I do want to give sort of a round robin opportunity to everyone. There are, as everyone has said, so many fantastic young reader comics and graphic novels out there. If you could offer one recommendation, I know it's so hard. I'll give you a moment. I'll stall a bit. If you can think of one recommendation that you would give to our audience today, what would it be? And Harley, we're going to start with you.
So I'm gonna say a Humanoids book, and I'm gonna say Paul's book. Honestly, Urban Legendz is Stranger Things for kids. It has a diverse cast. It feels real. It's all in Brooklyn, and it just feels like a great book that you can share with so many people. And then all of our big titles, everything that we do has an educational guide available. So if you're a parent at home or a teacher at home or a librarian who wants to share it, we have educational guides for all of our books, including Urban Legendz, which is a really, truly stellar title.
And Lauren, what about you? What's your recommendation?
Well, first, I just have to echo Urban Legendz. I loved it. And what I also love about Humanoids is that the end part of all their books has different activities that they can use. So I guess I'll do Young Mozart, because Harley had lent me Young Mozart. Thank you, Harley. And I included it in my library collection. And what I love about Young Mozart is that it's historical biography that's completely readable and fun. And at the end, there's wonderful activities that you can do as a family from home.
I write the activities.
Harley, great job.
And Tina, what about you?
I can't believe you're limiting me to one book. I'll do one author who is Svetlana. I'm going to butcher this name. Chemakova is how I think it's pronounced. She wrote Brave and Crush, and I'd say those fall into that sort of middle grade, but super accessible for even younger readers and all the way up to teens. They're super diverse. The artwork is beautiful. It touches on issues that kids have in school with bullying and self-acceptance. And they're a quality middle grade book that if a parent says, my kid read Smile Drama and they want something else, this is a perfect deep dive as to read all her books. And she has a new series out called the Wern books. And I'm not sure, it may not even be out because I read advanced reader copies of things. And it's sort of a spooky tale and a group of kids who stumble upon some spooky things in the woods. And it's scary, but I think it's still very age appropriate. So, and New Kid by Jerry Craft is wonderful. So,
excellent. And Paul, what about you?
I'm going to go with one that was a huge inspiration, trying to navigate the whole graphic novel world. And my kids are super into it now, Amulet. So yeah, just, it's just huge inspiration, just amazing artwork, great storytelling. And the sequencing of everything is just spot on. The characters are great. So that would definitely be my go-to.
Excellent. I'm going to give a shameless plug and support for indie creators out there. I would recommend Fanbase Press's Quince, the Eisner-nominated series, which is about a young Latina who gets superpowers on her quinceañera, but she only has them for the year she's 15. We just put out a collected bilingual hardcover where it's a flip book. You get the entire English version on one side, you flip it over, you get the entire version in Spanish. So cool. Highly recommend. As we are sadly, again, coming to the end of this panel discussion, first, I want to say a huge thank you to everyone, Tina, Lauren, Harley, and Paul. Thank you so much for your time and your experience and sharing them with us. For those interested in finding more of your work or learning about what it is that you do, what would be the best way to follow you? Paul, what about you?
I'm on Instagram at ppdanim. Just all lowercase. My reel is up on Vimeo. Urban Legendz is available on Amazon and bookstores and things like that. And it's crazy because I work in animation. I've worked for a long time. And when I put all of my contribution to all the films that I've worked on, it comes out to about 4 minutes, which is crazy. So you can see all of my work, all 20 years of my work in a 4-minute form online on Vimeo. So
we acknowledge your 20 years of hard work though, Paul. Harley, what about you?
So if you have questions about any of the Humanoids titles, you can find me either through our website, if you go to like the drop down of the Humanoids team. Also just my name, harley.salbacka at humanoids.com. I also have a personal Instagram where I do recommend books as well, Miss Harley R. Yeah, that's it. I love books. So yeah, you can ask me anything about any book.
My Instagram is it's Tina83. If you want to check out some of my old animation, you can look at it. I think it's still on HBO or HBO Plus, is the Harold and the Purple Crayon, which I'm still 20 years later just eminently proud of my contribution to that series. And lapl.org, my library, and I've curated a lot of book lists. There's blog posts, there's podcasts. We've got Hoopla, Overdrive, Freegal. There's just so many great avenues for graphic novel content. So
thank you, Tina. And Lauren, what about
just echoing Tina, don't forget about the library's website, lapl.org. And you can also, if you have any questions about graphic novels, especially with your young readers, you can email me at lkratz, Kratz, at lapl.org. I love helping people and answering emails. So if you have any questions, please email me there. Also, my library's Instagram account at Studio City, LAPL. There's a lot of great resources also on there.
Excellent. Well, again, a huge thank you to everyone. And thank you to the team at Humanoids for putting together this panel. You can also learn more about Fanbase Press at fanbasepress.com. You can learn more about Quince and the Quince hardcover at quincecomic.com. But again, thank you, everyone. Thank you to Comic-Con at home. And we wish you well in these challenging times.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.